Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Barbarian and this is a CK3 FAQ analysis video where I sit down together with you and we're going to talk about the questions and answers. In this case, we're going to talk about courts, guests and wanderers as well as, and we're going to skip this entire lifestyle topic because that's going to be its own video of course, and then seduction, torture and the intrigue perk tree. So all of that is quite interesting, all of that will be quite informative. Let me do something informative before we jump into those questions though. First of all, if you hadn't heard it, today there was no dev diary. Next week there will also be no dev diary, but the next dev diary will then come right after next week. So until then there will be no dev diary videos obviously, since there are no new dev diaries and there will be no dev diaries in itself. Now that doesn't mean that there won't be any content. This is channel related. As always, the timestamps for the particular topics and questions are in the description, meaning that you can just go along the timeline if you want to skip this channel related news. But I tested around of course in the last couple of weeks, in the last couple of months quite frankly, and I want you to know that I've settled on a daily content format, so don't worry about it. There will be daily uploads, there will be playthroughs, there will be gameplay, there will be video essays such as, you know, for example, the Imperator Rome one that I did very recently. There will be a lot of hot takes. Spoilers, a lot of the hot takes are, for example, focused around Victoria 2. So if you have strong opinions on Victoria 2, then you will probably be very angry about those videos, hopefully though in a positive and constructive fashion. But here's the thing, I will do many different videos, mostly edited, many with webcam, others not with webcam. I just wanted you to know so that you can be looking forward to that. If you have any questions, whether they contain anything about, you know, the dev diaries and the FAQ and CK3 in particular, feel free to ask them today right here in the comment section and I will be addressing them on the weekend, be that in a live stream or be that in a pre-recorded thing. I'm not quite sure, but I'm going to do just a comment review video for the weekend. Again, whether that is live or not live, I'm not entirely certain. If you have any questions pertaining to the topic of the channel and the future of the channel, because a lot of things are changing in how I structure my content, then feel free to ask me in the comments as well and I will address it in the comments as we go. Now with all that being said, again, the dev diaries will only continue in 2 weeks, so 14 days from now. Yeah, 14 days from now. We're going to actually jump into this FAQ right now. This was just channel related news and we're going to start with courts, guests and wanderers. And before we actually jump into this topic, I would like to show you a video that sort of has to do with the first part of this dev diary FAQ analysis. And that is essentially the time that it takes to progress in Speed 5. Just check down here in the bottom right. I hope that this doesn't get me a copyright strike. I would understand it if it did, but let's just see. Check this out. Boom. Check out how damn fast this goddamn video is. It is incredible. I mean, this is a Speed 5. It might be a NASA computer. It might be something absolutely insane that I can't currently explain. There might be a demon powering this particular machine that is running the game there, but that looks very positive for me because I'm pretty sure that is faster than Crusader Kings II runs for me, and I'm on a 3600X Ryzen, so AMD, and it runs like a wonderful game, you know, no doubt about it, but at the same time it never runs that fast. So that brings us to courts, guests and wanderers, because a reason for Crusader Kings III having that sort of performance, running so much better than Crusader Kings II, is without a doubt how they do characters. So let's just jump in. You can see I marked a lot of questions because a lot of them are very interesting. Is there a mechanism for culling excess courtiers globally or slowing their creation as the game runs long? One of the goals with wanderers is to make use of those excess courtiers. They will leave their court and try to go someplace where they are more needed. We generally only generate new characters when there are no wanderers available. Some wanderers are eventually killed off if they find no place to go. I think this is very interesting and this is very important because especially late game slowdown in Crusader Kings II, as far as I understand it, had multiple reasons. Obviously you had a lot of mean time to happen events that have a lot of checks and that double check each other all the time, making it so that the game slows down significantly. You had a lot of armies walking around, you had technology inflating armies and gold. But then, most importantly, I think you had a lot of useless characters. And we see that every time we do a plot in Crusader Kings 2. Every time you do a plot in Crusader Kings 2, you have about 100 characters involved in that plot, out of which you deal with about 2 on a daily basis. The rest are just random people that you've never talked to, that you will never talk to, and that you don't even know who they are. All of that made plots and your, you know, fellow plotters entirely meaningless because you didn't have any personal connection to any of them. That will, of course, change in CK3, as we already know. Plots become much more personal and arranged on a smaller level. But on top of that, since there are no more you know, courtier spams, we're running into a situation where even long term, and I can't guarantee this, but I can guarantee you that whenever I get this game, one of the first things that I will do is run a game and see how it performs long term. I assume there will be a significant slowdown because that's just what happens with grand strategy games, but I also assume that it will be still quite alright. We're going to see about that. I'm going to do some tests every 50 years. I'm going to run 1 year, and we're going to check how fast that is. So like, what is the time for 1 year? What sort of time amount does it take? I think that is a good idea to see how that goes. I'm very positive about it. I actually think that the Wanderer system and the general guest system makes it very, very fun and very attractive because it binds characters to you. Now, the individual characters are actually more meaningful, but on top of that, and probably more meaningful even, it makes it so that there are fewer characters in the world, making it so that the game runs better. I am hugely in favor of this Wanderer system and of making individual characters, even if they are merely, you know, just a person that doesn't even hold a title, making them more important is incredibly vital, I think, to making a good game here. Will married characters and characters with children travel alone or with their family, or both, according to their backstory? Characters tend to travel with their spouse and underage children unless they are separated by some unfortunate incident. This is a bit vague, of course, intentionally so. I mean, the developer here didn't want to be as clear as they could have been. This could mean, you know, hey, the literal approach is essentially that if you assassinate any of the characters, then of course they won't be traveling with them, but it could also mean that there are maybe some events that make it so that even Wanderers sometimes split up. That, you know, a family of Wanderers might be just saying, hey, you know what, I am divorcing my wife, or I'm leaving my wife behind and I'm now on my own. Even an underage child could theoretically do that. If they are like 15, they could say, I want to go on an adventure and just do that, and that could be a bit of a quest line. I think they would be interested, but I'm not entirely sure about it. I like the idea that there will be characters that are married. I mean, mostly I assume characters of renowned houses that will be traveling with their spouse and with their children. I think that is quite neat. Only 7 courtiers, so that is in response to a limit of, not really a limit, it's a soft cap where you will roughly, most of the time, have about 7 courtiers and guests. So you will usually have more than 7 courtiers and guests. The fewer courtiers you have, the more guests come to visit. If you want to recruit every guest that comes along, you're free to do so. You can create quite a big court if you want to. The biggest challenge in keeping a really big court is giving everyone a good reason to stay. I really endorse this. In CK2, they introduced something called a court limit, and that made it so that it's incentivized for the player and for the AI to say, hey, you character, I don't really care for you and you need to leave. I think it is a huge step forward to go away from the topic of the court cost, because it was, at the end of the day, still insanely insignificant. The court limit in CK2 cannot by any margin be compared to the actual vassal limit, for example. The vassal limit gave you a huge impact, and rightfully so, because obviously you're looking at a situation where you have so many vassals, you can't really manage them, some of them will skirt you on their taxes, etc, etc, and there will be a lot of corruption involved. But with a court, that doesn't really come to place. Whether you have 33 members in your court or 40, it doesn't really make that big a deal. It's not really that big a deal. It doesn't make that big a difference. Having them move on their own instead, I think, is the much more viable and the much more realistic option. I personally think this is exactly what is the right game incentive, because it makes it so that the characters have their own personalities. We saw that a while ago where there is a lady, essentially Novgorod, in that screenshot, and that lady says, I hope I can, like, you know, kind of put it in here, make it so that it's visible by being edited in, but where the lady says, you have 1 year to press my claim or I will leave. I think that is a beautiful mechanic. Otherwise they would just sit around as they do in your CK2 court. Will Wanderers move through adjacent realms or teleport randomly? I'm saying that it would be easier for Central European realms to attract Wanderers than fringe realms in Scandinavia. Could be an interesting aspect of the game. Most of the time, they will move to an adjacent area. However, in certain situations, they magically teleport across the map. I assume that this in particular effectively means, hey, if someone is willing to push your claim, you're probably going to go there immediately, and that is magically teleport. Or maybe sometimes I could also imagine, and that's a lot of speculation of course, but I could also imagine that there's some sort of quest line that makes it so, hey, you know, I all of a sudden got funded by someone, they chose in an event to fund me, and then I will immediately spawn in their court. For example, let's say you're in England, but you have a claim on a Breton realm, and somebody in Spain says, I want to finance your endeavor to take your claim. In that case, you would just immediately go to that court in Spain, and I think that's perfectly fine, but it is much more valuable than that to know that they will preferably move to an adjacent area, because that makes it quite interesting. You're going to have a bit of a wandering thing going on. I wonder how it would impact the situation if a court disappears. Where exactly do the courtiers go if I, for example, completely eliminate a court that existed previously, if I fully annex someone that was a religious enemy and is now gone, you know, all of those things. I would love how they get this, or I would love to know how they get distributed between the different courts that are in their adjacent areas, and of course between the different courts that may have even led to the destruction of the court that they were in previously. I think that is quite interesting, and that would make for interesting dynamics, I think, for a mod, for example, such as Rise to Power. Now, if you follow this channel a bit, then you will likely know that I'm not the biggest fan of Rise to Power. I think it's a really neat idea. I can completely see the idea of being a baron, of being a mercenary leader, of being a holy order leader, or of just being a landless fella, but I think the mod itself is very grind heavy, and that makes sense because it's a very clunky system, not because of the modder's fault, but because CK2 wasn't built around the premise of starting as a landless character, and that makes it so that, you know, most people are just there and it's a lot of grinding, because you're just hanging out, you're just waiting for the money to come along, you're just waiting for a family to adopt you, etc, etc. I played the mod quite a bit and never really endorsed it fully, but like, it's a really neat idea, and I think the modder did the best that could have been done with CK2 as it stands. But in CK3, if there is such a mechanic, and if modders in particular can use it in how the courtiers were to be distributed, I think that would be absolutely huge for a mod like that one. Can we invite specific people to our court? You can invite specific people to court, but they will be a lot more hesitant to say yes than in CK2. It was so easy in CK2 to get any genetic trait, to get any good a diplomat, a steward, etc, etc, because there were just such an abundance of characters in the world. Good to hear that that is no longer the case. However, you can use hooks, as mentioned by Wolf of Hunden in a previous DD, to convince characters to become your courtier even if they'd rather stay there where they are. So this is interesting. It adds scarcity in courtiers, which is something that we just didn't have in CK2 at all. I think this is a huge step forward. I mean, we haven't seen any of this in any capacity in CK2. You know, when you had a situation that you needed a trait, that you needed a claim, that you needed a certain skill set, you would just always find one. Either you generate someone randomly, or you simply invite someone from somewhere. If you have a big enough realm, there will always be someone that says, wait a minute, I serve a duke underneath you, you're an emperor, I'm clearly going to come to you, screw the duke, I'm gone. Now, they're no longer going to do this because, of course, it's quite the weird task. I mean, think about it, you lived all your life, right? You lived all your life at someone's court. They took care of you, they made you the master of coin, they made you the master of arms, whatever it is, and you brought up their children. You know, you taught the little lordlings about warfare, you taught them about religion, about stewardship, all that sort of stuff, and then the emperor comes and says, serve me. You wouldn't say yes, you know, I mean, Ed Stark said yes, but he said yes because he is a lord. The maester, for example, doesn't, you know, ever consider leaving the court. He is where he is, and I think that's much more relatable when it comes to how they do it here in CK3. I really like that idea of scarcity in courtiers and making it so that they are desired, but also sometimes make it so that, you know, if you can't fulfill their desires, they will simply leave you behind. I think that in every single circumstance is an added benefit to the game. Again, is also a much better way doing it this way, instead of just introducing a court cost that everybody ignores anyway. And if you make it high enough so that they don't ignore it, a court cost is just annoying, I'll be honest with you. It's just a very annoying mechanic. It's not a good mechanic. So again, very good that they chose to go with a very different approach. I think this is good for performance, and this is good for gameplay as well. I'm a huge fan, seriously. Like the Wanderer system, I don't think I can overstate just how excited I am about this. How long will they stay without a reason after being recruited this way? This might be rebalanced before release, but currently courtiers who can leave will leave after 3 years on average. However, this number can vary a lot. For example, claimants who think you might be able to press their claims will be more patient. Courtiers who really like you or are related to you will also generally stay for a longer time. So this is really neat. Makes it so that your character relationship with them matters. What I would like to do is just show two things off that I was previously looking at. Let's take a look at this one first. I really like this one. So effectively, we have people in our court, right? These are our actual courtiers, and as you can see right here, this fella here, no, this lady here, actually, it's interesting, actually. Are you seeing this? No, okay, I thought he was talking to this person, but no, the character here that is selected is Dagena, so that is this person. What I really love about this interface is that essentially you are, of course, looking at menus. You have your court over here, you have prisoners, you see a distinction between your family, between your courtiers, and then I assume between wanderers and whatever else there is, and the guests, of course. But then over here, we see this on the map. And what they have done with CK3 and what they're doing even with minor characters, I mean, think about it. This courtier doesn't have a job in the court. She just hangs around. She does nothing. She's lowborn. What else? I mean, she doesn't even have that amazing set of stats. She's Franconian. She is, I guess, good at martial, maybe a bit okay at, you know, diplomacy, but she's nothing really that you like. This is not a character that you really need to keep around, especially since you are a king of Bavaria. I mean, you are quite the illustrious ruler. There's a lot of power going around here in Bavaria. But the thing about it is, even she is represented with her actual location in Bavaria itself. And I know that this is mostly visual, but I like, and this is a design approach, I think, that needs to be pointed out, that is totally worth pointing out. I like the fact that they are visualizing where the characters actually are beyond simply zooming to their location like it is done with CK2, because I think it really brings home the idea of characters being on this map, of playing a role on this map and not just in a menu. The more CK3 pulls you out of menus and puts you on the map, the more immersed you will feel, and I think this is a gigantic step forward. Whether it actually will work, I mean, it depends on the functionality of this character portrait that we see right here with the character on the map. I think it really depends on how well this is used, whether it is used at all. I mean, it could just be like this visual, and if you click it, nothing happens, but, you know, if you could just essentially interact with your court with this map, if you could see, for example, where this courtier plans to go if you don't help them, I think this could also impact just your gameplay decisions. Imagine your claimant, a claimant that has a claim on Bavaria, says, hey, my dear, I don't know, brother, I will leave Bavaria because, you know, I want to find my own luck, and then you see they're going to your rival kingdom. If you let them go, you might as well consider twice whether you let them go and then potentially have their claim pressed against you, and you might lose that war and, you know, no longer be the king of Bavaria, or you just give them a county, make them happy, you know, make them content and not make them become a bit of an upstart. Those things, I do think, would have an impact on how we interact with people, on how we view them, whether we view them as a threat. I think that would be a huge impact right there, whether you can tell where they are going and when they are going, like roughly, of course, not exactly. But I think this would be super welcome. I mean, the entire interaction on the map is something that I really want to see stressed and put a focus on in CK3, because the more we get out of the menus, the more we get onto the map, the more I think the game ultimately benefits itself. Now this over here, I just have the screenshot because it just shows Bavaria. It just shows Bavaria in all its glory. I mean, look at how big, and I've talked about this. I post this like every month in the CK3 Discord, in the official one, because when you look at this map, I mean, my god, never has Bavaria felt this large. It's honestly, it kind of, I'm a bit stunned, I'll admit it. Never ever has Bavaria felt like it was a couple of weeks of travel through this territory. When you look at CK2 Bavaria, you're looking at essentially what, like 3-4 provinces from south to north, right? That's all you look at, but look at this stuff. I mean, this is just gorgeous. Alright, but with all that being said, let's move on to today's sponsor. The sponsor of this video is, first of all, that weird sound that my computer just made, but also the members of the channel are the sponsor of this video, namely the Barons, Stefan the Pelted, Achilles, Noah, Eterna, Falling Phoenix, Jacob, the Musielago, Dan, Florian, MFW, Mitchell, Aaron, Stefan, and Snywolf. Then, of course, also the Counts, Lachlan, Kazen, Wombit, Thomas, Shifty, and Rex Romanorum, and last but not least, the absolutely beautiful Dukes, Eric, Kiriana, Goodfield, Nathan, Jack, Kenneth, Lexo, and God Gamer. Earlodis. Now, I'm not sure whether the name is pronounced Earlodis. It could also be pronounced in a Tolkien-style way. Earlodis also sounds very cool. Let me know about it. But this video is, either way, sponsored by the members of the channel, because this isn't actually a sponsored video at all. This is just a video that I make for the channel, and of course that is made possible by the members. Now, let's jump down here. Let's go to Seduction, Torture, and Intrigue perk trees. Again, the lifestyle one will be either for the end of this week or next week, and we're going to talk about this in depth because the lifestyles are absolutely amazing. It's such a huge addition to the existing way of lifestyle focuses that we have in CK2. I think because of the lifestyles alone, I will be very, very much unwilling to go back to CK2. I get this question a lot because there's so many mods, and this is a bit of a bridge now, but there's so many mods in the works right now, freshly done for CK2. There's, for example, Just After the End, made by the brilliant mind that wrote the events and the entire like lore around the rework of California, and in After the End fanfolk. If you haven't heard of that mod, don't worry about it too much, but that person is making a new mod, and that is essentially a prequel to the After the End fanfolk mod, and it's really, really cool, and it's really, really nice, but it's in CK2, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be working on that. I'm saying you should absolutely be working on that, because many, many people will still play CK2, but I'll be honest with you, when I see the lifestyle trees, and again more on that next week, makes me consider whether I will ever go back to it. I'll be honest with you. Now let's jump into Seduction, Torture, and the Intrigue perk trees. Roughly how long does it take to fill up one perk tree? Depends on a few things, particularly whether your lifestyle matches your education. Education gives additional bonuses to your lifestyle education, but a long-lived character will typically be able to fill out between 2 and 3 trees. That might change for release, of course, but that would be that's what we have it at right now. So we don't know whether this is actually still permanent. I remember this question, it was asked very, very early on into the Q&A cycle, meaning that this might have changed since then. However, if you think about it, to finish a lifestyle tree means that you truly mastered a section, be it being a seducer, be it being a plotter, be it being a general, you know, all of those things, you are a master at it. You have masterful knowledge of it. And I think that is quite significant. So to finish 2 or possibly 3 if you really want to, you know, if you live a long enough life, let's say about maybe 70 years, something like that, maybe 80. I'm not quite sure where the limits are there, but that is quite significant because it means you are an expert in 3 topics. That makes you very versatile, that makes you very aggressive. And I think that the meta, so to speak, I mean, it depends on how you roleplay your character, how much you focus on different things, and how much you decide to give into potentially, you know, rising up needs that a character has. But I think the meta will essentially be to have, if this balancing stays the same, that you go for 2 perk trees, but like in between you always pick up some starter perks somewhere, because those starter perks, you know, some of them are very powerful, some enable you to have new casus belli, etc, etc. So people will pick up like individual perk trees in, you know, from some hand-picked perk trees that they're not going to finish, but they are going to dip into. So I think we're going to end up with 2 trees essentially, and then like whatever else you really needed for that character. 2 to 3 sounds honestly perfectly alright to me. I don't know about the balancing. Again, I haven't played the game either. I wish I had, but I haven't. And all I can say is that I think that 2 to 3 is about right. I mean, it makes me wonder, you know, in the mods, you can definitely change the experience required for a perk and the experience given by activities, be it by focuses, be it by events, etc, etc. So that like when you have a game like Elder Kings, for example, you want to have maybe like characters that have about, you know, let's say like 4, 5, 6 classes if you're gonna go really balls deep, especially when you have an immortal character, that sort of stuff. So like I think the balancing here is definitely, it's super positive for me, rather I should say, that the balancing is something that is so easily changeable because it's never anywhere hard-coded. All of these trees can be rewritten, they can be completely new, etc, etc. So I think this shouldn't really be an issue. It's very positive to know though that they want your character to be a master at the end of their life, if they're a good character, in multiple things. What penalties are there if you get caught seducing the heir apparent's wife? There will be consequences. Exactly what kind depends on your faith, on how your faith views adulterous behavior, so keep your eyes open for a future dev diary on religions. We know at this point that some faiths might be very favorable towards adulterous behavior, towards intrigue as a whole. This is very, very nice, but of course this can also give someone a hook against you. If your religion doesn't view adulterous behavior as bad, then nobody can get a hook on you, but if it does, then people can gain a hook on you for this matter. Can you start more than 1 lifestyle trees from a specific category? Like, could I start Seducer and then start Schemer, mixing both but mastering none? Yes, you can mix and match perks from different trees and even from different lifestyles as you please. It is the entire lifestyle, Intrigue in this case, which gets a perk unlock, and then you can choose to spend it on any of the 3 trees. So you can, for example, pick the first Torturer perk, even though you've so far gone halfway down the Seducer tree. Very positive. I mean, it also means that there's a lot of flexibility in your character. In Crusader Kings II, what's always so negative about it from my point of view is that any given lifestyle choice is incredibly 2D. It's a tunnel vision thing. For the entire period of you focusing on this lifestyle, your character does only that lifestyle. I think that is pretty tedious. I think that's pretty negative. I really like the change up there, that they don't go with that, that they go with, you know, something else here, with the idea of, hey, you know what, of course you are a 3D character, you have multiple layers, you don't always do the exact same thing, you don't sit down and go like, oh, I need to pray again today. I mean, obviously, if you are religiously oriented, then you might as well, but what I mean is scholarship and theology, as they are separated in CK2, aren't as separated as they, you know, or weren't that separated in real life, and still aren't as separated. It's a very tightly knit topic there, because, I mean, scholarship at the end of the day is, you know, religious studies, and religious studies can be scholarship. It's like the two things are tightly connected, although not necessarily completely inclusive. But I like the idea that they realize this and they give us more freedom to build characters that are multi-layered. How realistic is your character's seduction ability? As some random counters, can I seduce the Pope or the Byzantine Emperor? Tier differences affect success chances for succession, so it's harder to seduce above your station. You can definitely seduce the Pope or Emperor if you're good enough, though, no matter how lowly a countess you are. Whether that's realistic or not really comes down to your real-life seduction abilities, I guess. They should not restrict us too much. Yeah, I understand where the question is coming from, because when would a countess even be able to properly interact with the Byzantine Emperor or with the Pope? But at the end of the day, I mean, it's a game, right? We need the game mechanics to kind of bow to us here, I think, in this case. Are you able to seduce your wife, husband with seduction? Yes, you can make them your lover or soulmate. Good news, because before that in CK2, you had some random events that could make this happen, but you could not, as far as I understand it. If I remember this correctly, I might be misremembering this, but I don't think that you could seduce your wife, and of course soulmates weren't even a thing in CK2 at all. With that being said, a lot of very interesting stuff. What do you think about the courtier system? What are your concerns? I'll be honest with you, I'm incredibly positive about it. What do you think about seduction? I think seduction is a huge step up in comparison to CK2, where it was mostly tedious and a character event spam if you wanted to go for the Master Seducer trait. Now in this case, since we have a lot of flexibility to our focus and how we play our character, I think that it's a different endeavor here as a whole, I think. But again, the bigger focus, I think, in this video was the entire Courts, Guest, and Wanderers system and how fast the game runs, even at game start, which is, of course, I mean, you know how these games have to run fast at game start. But let me know what you think. I can't even talk anymore. Let me know what you think, and remember, ask the questions in the comment section when it comes to the future of the channel and when it comes to the dev diaries, because I'm going to do a lengthy talk about it on the weekend. Until then, later, alligator.